walk through life like many others. Career polished smile, rehearsed future, planned out to the detail. People call you successful. You nod. They say you're lucky. You smile. But behind those gentle nods and calm smiles lies a truth that never had the courage to speak its name. It began 10 years ago, a Tuesday like any other. Nothing about that day felt special until he appeared. He was standing by the poetry section at a bookstore downtown, running his fingers across the spines like they held secrets only he could read. You noticed the small things first. How he bit his lower lip while reading the way his eyebrows creased in thought. How his voice trembled slightly when asking about Rilke. That day you offered a recommendation. That evening you shared coffee. That night you couldn't sleep. You didn't call it love then. No, that word felt far too loud for what you had, something quieter, gentler, almost sacred. You told no one. Not your friends, not your family. Because love in your world came with conditions. And your kind of love wasn't part of the picture your family painted when they spoke of your future. Back home, your mother had dreams stitched into every dinner conversation. A nice girl, a wedding grandchildren. Your father proud and composed imagined legacy in a surname passed down, not whispered confessions behind closed doors. And so you hid him. Like a sacred treasure too fragile for the world to see, the two of you built something extraordinary in the shadows. Morning rituals with fresh tea and sleepy eyes. Long walks in the rain where you didn't need to pretend. Books shared, jokes told, hands held beneath tables in crowded cafes. You never had to ask each other if it was love. It simply was. But outside life moved like a storm. Friends got married. Cousins posted pictures of engagements. Every family gathering became a landmine. Still single, someone would ask, eyes full of well-meaning pity. You would laugh and shrug, while inside you wondered if anyone would ever know the truth behind your silence. Love should never be something you carry like a secret. But for you it had to be. Not because you were ashamed, but because you were afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of the words that would shatter your family's image of you. Afraid that the person you love might be treated as something less than human. So you did what so many do. You chose silence. You kissed him goodbye every morning and watched him disappear into a day where he couldn't be your partner, only your friend. You lived two lives, one for them, one for you, 10 years. That's a long time to love someone in silence. But love has its own memory, its own weight, and no matter how hard you try, love refuses to stay invisible forever. Now, as you sit with this memory, you ask yourself a question you've never dared to voice. Will they ever accept it? Will they ever see that he made me better, not broken? The answer hasn't come yet, but perhaps in telling this story and inviting you to listen, a door creaks open. Maybe in your heart you understand. Maybe you've loved quietly too, and maybe, just maybe, we're no longer alone. You show up on time like always. Your shirt is crisp, your smile well practiced. The scent of roasted chicken fills the air, the familiar warmth of home wraps around you like a faded sweater. But something else lingers too, an invisible tension, one you've learned to live with. Your mother passes you a plate. Eat more, you're too thin, she says. Your father asks about work again. No one ever asks about your heart. Maybe because they think they already know it. Maybe because they don't want to hear an answer that doesn't fit the picture they painted. And so you nod. You smile. You ask about your cousin's baby laugh at your uncle's bad jokes, and try not to glance at the empty seat beside you, the one he should be sitting in. He's at home tonight like most nights when you come here. He understands. He always has. He tells you not to worry that family dinners are important. But you see it in his eyes, the weariness of being someone else's secret. When your mother talks about marriage, it's always in the future tense. Someday, when you find a nice girl, her voice trails off like a lullaby written for a child who no longer dreams. You sit in silence, stirring your food, wishing just once she would ask the right question. You remember the first time you tried to tell her. You were 24. You'd been dating him for almost 2 years. You thought maybe it was time. You chose a quiet evening, made tea, rehearsed every word. And just when your lips parted to speak, she interrupted with a photo of someone's daughter, asking if she was your type. You smiled. You drank the tea. And you buried the truth again. Family can be a prison dressed like comfort. It's the weight of expectations. It's knowing they love you, but not knowing if that love would survive who you really are. So you build walls, not out of spite, But out of survival, you become fluent in their language, deflection, small talk, laughter that doesn't quite reach your eyes. You learn to swallow the words that ache to rise. You keep his photos in a drawer instead of on your desk. You hold his hand in the dark, but never in daylight. There's a certain ache that comes with pretending you're fine. It doesn't scream, it whispers. At dinner tables, during birthdays, on holidays where he wraps your gifts in gold and you tell your family it's from a friend. And still through all this, he stays. He waits. He understands the parts of you that even you sometimes resent. He never demands. He never begs. But in the quiet of your shared home, he sometimes asks, "Do you think they'll ever know me as more than a name?" And you have no answer. But you want to believe desperately that one day they will. Because love isn't a phase. It isn't a rebellion. It isn't a shame to outgrow. It's the man who learned how your coffee tastes. Who waited outside your office during rainstorms. Who held your trembling hands the night you came back from your father's birthday dinner. Eyes full of tears from all the things you couldn't say. And maybe if they could see him the way you do, they would understand. But for now, the shadows stay, and so does the silence. There comes a moment in every secret life when the walls begin to close in, when pretending becomes too heavy, when silence is no longer safe, just suffocating. For you, that moment came the year you turned 27. You had been carrying this love for 5 years, 5 birthdays, 5 Christmases, 5 whispered "I love yous" in the dark. And you thought maybe they deserve to know. Maybe love, when it lasts this long, is no longer a secret, but a truth. So you told her. Not everyone, just your mother. The one who used to tuck you in and say, "You can tell me anything." You believed that. You needed to. You waited for the right moment. Chose your words carefully, wrapped them in gentleness. You told her about him, how kind he was, how he listened, how he made you laugh when you couldn't even smile. You told her he made you better, but she didn't hear that part. All she heard was him, and then came the silence. Not the stunned processing kind, but the sharp slicing kind. The kind that disowns without saying the word. Her voice trembled, but not with love. With fear. With anger. "That's not who you are," she said. "That's not the life I raised you for." You tried to explain. You reached for her hand. But she pulled back like you were something contagious. And when she looked at you, it was as if she couldn't see her son anymore, only a stranger in familiar skin. That night you drove home with shaking hands and blurred vision. He was waiting at the door, eyes searching your face. You didn't need to speak. He pulled you in without asking. And you cried. You cried for every child who was told their love made them unworthy. For every time you laughed at dinner while breaking inside. For every day you prayed your truth wouldn't destroy the people you loved. Rejection isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a slow withdrawal, fewer phone calls, shorter conversations, invitations that stop coming. You feel it in the small things, your absence from family photos, the way your name is left out, when someone talks about future weddings. He sees it too. He never says it, but you catch him hesitating, wondering if it's worth it, if you'll ever get to be proud of him publicly, like straight couples do without a second thought. He never complains. But one night he asks quietly, "Is love always this hard?" You don't have an answer. Only a hand to offer. Only your presence. Only your grief pressed against his shoulder like an apology. In moments like these, you understand why so many give up. Why some choose silence forever. Why others walk away from love that asks too much of their courage. But he stays. And so do you. Because the pain is real, but so is the love. And sometimes that's all you have. That and the hope that one day your mother might call again, not to ask about work or weather, but to ask how he is. To say his name. To say, "Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I want to meet him." That day hasn't come, but hope lives in strange places. Sometimes in a quiet meal shared after a storm. Sometimes in a hand that never lets go. There are nights when even love feels small. When the silence from your family drowns out the warmth of the person sleeping beside you. When the rejection wraps itself around your chest like cold steel. On those nights, you wonder, how do others live like this? How do they keep going? That's when you turn to stories not your own, but theirs. Ellen DeGeneres once said, "It's hard to live your life in a way that's authentic when the people you love wish you weren't." You read those words alone in your bedroom, and for the first time someone understood you without even knowing your name. You think about Neil Patrick Harris and David Burtka, who loved openly even when the world wasn't ready. You read about how their twins call them both dad, and how their family was once questioned by strangers who couldn't understand something so simple: love exists in many forms. And every one of them is real. You remember when Lil Nas X wrote, "Some of y'all not gonna fuck with me no more." But before this month ends, I want y'all to remember that this man made history. He said it with fire. You read it with tears. Because you weren't trying to make history, you were just trying to live. Their stories don't erase your pain, but they remind you you're not the first, not the only one. That loneliness, while unique in its shape, is also something passed hand to hand, soul to soul, until it becomes bearable. You think about the people who never got to tell their stories. Those whose names don't appear in headlines, who died never knowing what acceptance felt like, who carried love like a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. You mourn for them, but more than that, you fight for them. Every day you choose to stay, to love, to hope. You become part of something bigger, and then one day you meet someone new. Not a lover, but a friend. A quiet, nervous soul who just came out to his parents and was told not to come home. You see the same fear in his eyes that once lived in yours. And you tell him your story not because you have answers, but because you've walked through the same fire. Because sometimes survival is the most powerful thing you can offer. He listens. He doesn't cry. But later he sends you a message. "Thank you for seeing me. I didn't think anyone would." And just like that, the world shifts. This chapter of your life is not defined by rejection, but by connection. You start to understand something sacred when you speak your truth. Even through tears, you light a candle for someone still stuck in the dark. Your love may not be accepted by your family, not yet, but it is understood by strangers who become your tribe. It is honored by stories written long before yours. It is validated not by law nor tradition, but by its endurance. 10 years of quiet love, 10 years of resilience. And even if no one ever says I'm proud of you, you can now say it to yourself. I am proud of us, of this life we've built, of every silent tear that didn't wash us away but made us stronger. Because when you love in a world that taught you to hide, it's not just love, it's bravery. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't some grand declaration or cinematic moment where you stood on a table and shouted, "I choose him." No, it was quieter than that, like most brave things are. It was the way you stopped flinching when someone asked, "Are you seeing anyone?" The way you stopped erasing his name from your stories. The way you stopped apologizing for being whole. After 10 years of shadowed love, of choosing silence to preserve peace, something in you cracked, but in the best way. Like a shell breaking so something real could finally breathe. You remember the moment clearly. It was a Sunday morning. You were both sitting in the kitchen, barefoot, messy hair, 2 mugs of coffee, one dog snoring on the floor. And he looked at you, not with urgency or demand, but with calm certainty. And he said, "Let's stop waiting for permission." You didn't answer right away. You just sat with that sentence, let it settle into your bones. Because the truth is, you were tired. Tired of crafting two versions of your life. Tired of editing joy to fit other people's comfort. Tired of shrinking your love to make it more palatable for people who would never care enough to understand. And that morning you said yes. You moved in together. Bought a small house on a quiet street, nothing flashy, just enough for 2 souls and a golden retriever named Max. You hung up photos on the hallway wall once, where you were holding hands, laughing eyes, unafraid. You hosted dinner for friends, lit candles, played music, and laughed without restraint. And for the first time, your home felt like it reflected your life, not the life others expected of you, but the one you chose. Together. Your family didn't come visit. Not yet. But their absence no longer felt like a sentence. It felt like a choice. One you no longer had to beg them to unmake. Because now for every door that stayed shut, there were others that opened. Neighbors waved. Friends became family. Strangers at cafes smiled when you held his hand across the table. No one whispered. No one stared. Sometimes love survives in spite of the world. But sometimes it thrives because you dare to change your world. You still remember the first time you introduced him as my partner at a work event? Your voice didn't shake. You watched reactions with open eyes and you didn't flinch when one man raised an eyebrow. Because someone else smiled and said you two seem perfect together. You carried that moment home like a treasure. Love isn't always about dramatic declarations. Sometimes it's about everyday choices. Waking up and saying, I will not be ashamed of this. I will not live afraid. I will love him and I will let the world see that love. You may have lost things along the way. Some relationships faded, some conversations never resumed. But what you gained was yourself. And him, still here, still smiling, still making your coffee just right. You chose him once in a bookstore, and every day since you've chosen him again. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. You still see them sometimes, your parents. Not often. Birthdays, holidays, moments where the calendar insists on reunion even when hearts haven't yet caught up. They ask how you are. You say good. They ask about work. You not offer the highlights. They never ask about him. His name, after all these years, still sits like glass in their mouths, too sharp to touch. And yet, something has changed. Not in their words, but in your posture, in your voice, in the way you no longer fold yourself into the version they wish you were. You still remember the day they found out you'd bought a house together. Your mother went quiet. Your father shook his head. But they didn't yell. They didn't walk out. They just sat there, as if trying to reconcile the son they raised with the man in front of them. You didn't try to explain. You'd already done that. This time you just stood still. You let your truth echo without apology, because by now you understand something essential. Acceptance is not always a thunderclap. Sometimes it's the absence of rejection. Sometimes it's a seat left for him at the table, even if no one says his name. You're no longer waiting for their blessing. You're no longer measuring your joy against their silence. You've built a life, solid, steady, full of laughter and warm lights and soft Sunday mornings. But sometimes late at night you still wonder, will they ever understand? Will they ever see that this wasn't rebellion? This was love. You ask not because you need their approval, but because you still remember being a child who just wanted to be seen. And sometimes that child still lives inside you. You think about all the others like you, the ones still hiding, the ones still praying for a phone call, a kind word, a hand to hold at the dinner table. You think about the younger version of yourself sitting in his bedroom, rehearsing the truth in a whisper. And to him you say this, you will be okay. You will love and be loved. And even if your family never understands, you will build one that does. This story was never meant to be about tragedy. It was always a love story, just not the kind that ends in fireworks and fairy tales. It ends in quiet strength, in choosing truth over comfort, in knowing that love, real love, does not need permission to exist. He's lying beside you now, reading a book, wearing that old sweater you love. He looks over and smiles, and in that smile is everything your family still doesn't understand. But everything you've ever needed, you close your eyes and breathe. Because while they may never fully accept it, you have. And that's where the healing begins. Some people won't understand your love. That doesn't make it less real. Some families won't embrace your truth. That doesn't make it less holy. But if you can love freely, fiercely, and without shame, you have already won. And if you're listening to this, wondering if anyone would ever accept you, let this be your answer. You are already worthy. You are already loved. And your story matters.